We're ready.
Hi, my name is Lion Winsmew. Our topic is the U.S. should commit to developing an infrastructure for utilizing self-driving vehicles. These vehicles are commonly referred to as autonomous vehicles. However, there are many different forms of autonomous vehicles, so it's important for us to define autonomous vehicles as cars that are incapable of being driven by a human being. It is for this reason that I want you all to forget everything that you know about cars and embrace this new, safe form of transportation. What my partner and I are talking about is a type of transportation where cars can tailgate each other and not have to worry about sudden braking. Cars will not have to stop at stop signs or stoplights when other cars are not present. No one will ever miss their exit on the freeway, and accidents will be virtually inexistent. These are just a couple of things my partner and I will mention in our support for the policy change. The first problem that autonomous cars will address is a dwindling of resources. Oil is a non-renewable resource, and the preservation of this resource is key to our economy. The U.S. Department of Energy and Information Systems has stated that the global supply of crude oil is expected to be adequate to meet the world's demand for liquid fuels for at least the next 25 years. That being said, 25 years is not that long of a time. So we must begin to start looking at viable solutions. And one of the main problems with oil expenditure is the waste of oil on cars. This is because the oil waste on cars is because there's a constant accelerating and braking and re-accelerating, which is wasteful as the main expenditure of oil occurs while the car is accelerating. According to the Texas Transportation Institute, 1.9 billion gallons of wasted fuel, which is equivalent to 2 months of the operation of the Alaska pipeline, are due to unnecessary accelerating and braking each year. Autonomous cars would greatly reduce this practice because cars would be absent from stopping at stop signs or streetlights. When they're empty, congestion caused by accidents would be virtually non-existent, as cars would be able to communicate with each other to avoid collisions, and slow drivers who cause you to brake, change lanes, will never be an issue again. This alone is extremely worthwhile for the government to invest, because the government is as dependent on oil as we are. In 2006, the U.S. government, President W. Bush stated in his State of the Union address that keeping America competitive requires affordable energy. And here we have a serious problem. America is addicted to oil. The second problem that will be resolved by autonomous cars is a reduction in driving restrictions. Restrictions impede a perfect society. Now, I'm not saying that restrictions are not necessary, because they are necessary for safety reasons. However, autonomous cars really cut down on those safety issues. Some of these issues that I mentioned earlier, such as streetlights and stop signs, won't really be necessary anymore. However, one of the big things is speed limits. Speed limits slow transportation immensely. Human drivers need them, but to avoid veering off the road or preventing them from losing control of their cars. Speed-related crashes, according to the Department of Transportation, the speed-related crashes account for 13,000 fatalities per year in the United States. But the reason for these crashes is irrelevant to autonomous cars, because autonomous cars would only drive as fast as they would go while still transporting you safely. Brian Templeton, a consultant for producers of autonomous cars such as Google, states that autonomous cars have two basic laws programmed in them: be safe and do not unfairly impede the flow of traffic. He then went on to say that once robocars can be certified safe, they may well be able to drive even faster than humans can safely drive. This means that autonomous cars will produce a faster, safer, more efficient form of transportation. However, as Brian Templeton said earlier, a certification would be required. This means that the government would have to get involved in this. As every other product sold to Americans, the government would have to inspect, regulate, and invest time and resources to guarantee safety. The third reason why the government should invest in autonomous cars is because manned vehicles waste government resources. As I mentioned before, the government currently has plenty of restrictions on manned vehicles in the name of safety. Well, with restrictions comes authoritative figures who enforce these laws. There are many governmental organizations who act as authorities on these traffic regulations, and the government can virtually do away with some of these organizations, while others they can make heavy cuts to. Some of these examples of these organizations, like the DMV, the California DMV had an operating cost of $921 million in 2011 to 2012. And that's just one of the 50 states. The California Highway Patrol had an operating cost of $960,056,000, which that complete organization could just be voided and get rid of. And lastly, the Los Angeles Police Department, who has over 10,000 sworn officers, who average a base salary of $68,400, spends a significant amount of their time enforcing traffic violations. In fact, in 2013, the LAPD, the police department, was sued by former officers who were told that they needed to meet ticket quotas. Officers, the LAPD responded by saying that officers were told to spend 80% of their time enforcing vehicle code violations that could lead to serious injury or death. Whereas this is all good and dandy, the intentions of the police department is they're good intentions. However, none of these issues would be none of this would be an issue if autonomous cars were implemented. The final issue that I want to talk about is the government themselves are the #1 factor behind slow advancements in autonomous cars. In order for autonomous cars to become a reality, the cars have to go through a series of tests, modify their design, and grow consumer confidence. All these aspects are controlled by the government because the position of whether or not to allow them has been skeptical and vague. This destroys consumer confidence and prevents companies from investing their resources. Hillary Kane of Toyota's Director of Tech and Innovation Policy said the lack of legislation and regulation on how self-driving cars will be governed is a hurdle. Until we know what the rules of the road will be, it's hard to move forward. And lastly, even big companies such as Google, who are leading the way for self-driving autonomous cars, are having issues because of limitations inflicted to them by governmental organizations. In 2012, California passed a law to allow autonomous vehicles to be tested in California. However, the DMV then went and told them that those specific testing were limited to specific cities. Therefore, Google has mapped only 2,000 miles of road out of the 4 million miles of the U.S. has. And autonomous cars would need all 4 million miles to become completely effective. And this would take time, and that's why the government should do it now.